Alright guys, so let's cover the economic war today because they are evolving really fast. And today we must talk about the different system BRICS is starting to set up, and the first bombshell to drop is a new architecture being built to bypass Western currencies. We know the US dollar is the top dog today, but there's no guarantee this will last forever. Every single reserve currency has fallen, including the pound sterling, and it won't be any different for the US dollar, and we have a new report to share. In Kazan, Russia will be pitching a new enhanced BRICS payment system. Putin wants to introduce this to finally break away from the US dollar system. Now, this architecture will be powered by blockchain technology and tokens will be used. Apart from saving billions of dollars, this will help the entire bloc break away from US sanctions. Over the past 3 years, Russia has been hammered with a ton of sanctions, we all know that. We have had multiple reports that even China is wary of activating their state-owned banks to facilitate trade with Russia. It's critical we make the distinction here. Most of Russia's trade with China is done in rubles and RMB, but they still go through the banking system, and that means the transactions can be ultimately traced. And the US has warned Beijing about simply trading with Russia. Dual use goods here, and that's a very ambiguous term.
Russia would struggle to sustain its assault on Ukraine without China's support. In my meetings with NATO allies earlier this month, and with our G7 partners just last week, I heard that same message. Fueling Russia's defense industrial base not only threatens Ukrainian security, it threatens European security. Beijing cannot achieve better relations with Europe while supporting the greatest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. As we've told China for some time, ensuring transatlantic security is a core U.S. interest. In our discussions today, I made clear that if China does not address this problem, we will.
It's not just Blinken, Sullivan and Yellen, they have both threatened to target Chinese banks as well. So you can see the big urgency Russia has to push for a new payment system. The details here are very important. It tells us what Putin is planning to do with this BRICS trading system. Firstly, this involves the Bank of Russia and the Russian Finance Ministry, and that means Elvira Nabolina is involved. She's the head of Russia's central bank and a big reason why Moscow survived the sanctions. Why, despite fighting a war, Russia's economy has not overheated and collapsed. Her involvement is a big signal that Russia wants to get this system up and running as soon as possible. We could see a formal idea presented or discussions happening in Kazan very soon. The overarching plan is pretty simple. You develop a network of commercial banks that conduct transactions in local currencies. In other words, a multi-currency system. You also establish direct links between central banks. You need to do this to do currency swaps for trade. So if I have rupees and I need rubles, the central bank link takes care of that. In such a network, the only way possible for this to be feasible is to use the blockchain. What Russia wants is to create a big black box system, a gigantic box that ensures the G7 can't see all the transactions happening. After all, we all remember what Senator Marco Rubio said about dollars and sanctions.
Look, I think the bottom line is we're in a conflict. And I think we have to start talking about it that way. You know, a lot of time, most of the people who are up here now don't remember. You know, I was very young, obviously, at the end of the Cold War, but it's been about 30 years since there was another superpower on the earth that was in conflict with the United States. And we are back in that place. And we need to stop pretending like that's not the case. Now, I hope it's never an armed conflict, but it's a conflict at every level you can imagine. Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them.
So to prevent this, the blockchain has to be used. Russia is also proposing to take it further, to create a system where there's total trust without the risk of any country defaulting. And to do this, Russia is proposing a distributed ledger technology or DLT, and this will help eliminate credit risk. Everyone will be in the loop and transactions will be recorded on each participant's end. And here's what this means. If Russia sells oil to China in RMB, The information won't just be recorded by Beijing or Moscow. A distributed ledger allows the record to be spread across the participants. So records in India and the UAE can help to verify that the transaction is done. It's important because it helps to build trust in the system. Russia and China will have to honor the oil for RMB deal, and there's no need for any other third party to verify. And this really helps to build much needed trust. And let's remember that this system would have never happened if the West didn't weaponize the financial system in the first place. If the dollar and SWIFT were never weaponized, a BRICS payment system would not even be necessary. Confiscating Russian assets to back G7 loans to Ukraine just made this worse. But now it's on the cards, and we can expect big implications once the system is launched. Just between China and BRICS, trade is exploding up. In Q1 this year, bilateral trade between Beijing and the rest of BRICS hit nearly 1.5 trillion yuan, and that's around $210 billion, up by 11.3%. As the BRICS payment system comes online, we can expect more trade to flourish between the members. Trade can be done in secrecy and there isn't a need to use dollars anymore. This accelerates the shift away from dollars, and when you transact less in dollars, naturally, the demand for US treasuries, US bonds would drop as well. All these, they are the chain effects the US financial system isn't prepared for. Central banks around the world, they are already moving away from US bonds for a variety of reasons. Over the last 10 years, central banks around the world, they have been stockpiling a lot of physical gold, and to no one's surprise, the biggest buyers are China and Russia. Moscow bought nearly 1,300 tons while China added just under 1,200 tons. As the BRICS payment system gets ramped up, the shift from dollars to gold will only continue. So if you hold gold, this payment architecture is a big tailwind you must pay attention to. Trade within the BRICS bloc will explode. Fewer dollars and euros will be used, and member countries they will have to store their reserves in alternative assets. But let's talk about the next BRICS innovation that is a direct threat to the West, more specifically the US farming industry. Now, Russia wants to create a BRICS grain exchange. Putin's plan is to consolidate the collective power of the BRICS agriculture industry to push back against the West. Currently, the price of wheat and other grains is determined in commodity exchanges in the US. The futures market in the COMEX determines the selling prices of commodities around the world. Paper contracts and agreements built on leverage somehow are controlling the revenue and profits of farmers globally. This is inherently a very unfair system that Russia wants to break. Collectively, the BRICS nations dominate the global grain market. Just the five founding members, including Russia, China, and India, they have a monopoly. They account for 42% of global grain production at 1.2 million tons. The bloc also accounts for 40% of global consumption. BRICS coming together to build a trading system, including the grain exchange, will wreck how farmers in the West conduct business. It hides price discovery and secures supply and demand for the global South first. US farmers are already in crisis mode. Trump is threatening farming manufacturers like John Deere with tariffs unless they produce in the US, and that means farming costs they are going to head up. Farms in the US are getting less and less profitable. Since 2023, farmers in the US they have had an overproduction of soybeans and corn by nearly 30%, and that's a very big surplus. A surplus pushes prices down. It costs money to store excess production as well. And because food is perishable, eventually you will have to sell the excess harvest at a loss. Farmers in the US, they're not acting on the right intelligence. Before each harvest farms, they have to forecast how much to plant and to harvest, and this means gauging global supply and demand. US farm income is already being squeezed hard. Since 2022, margins they have been decimated. Revenue from crop and livestock sales are down by 5%. Federal support has been cut by 33%, but aid for Ukraine is rising, so the priorities of the US government are quite clear here. Production expenses are up by 6% thanks to inflation. Overall, the net farm income in the US has collapsed by 23%, and this is just from poor planning and a higher cost of domestic production. Russia, China, and the BRICS trading system will make the situation much worse. you will now have 40% of supply and demand going inwards. As the BRICS start trading amongst themselves, they have the power to set prices and literally put US farmers out of work. Just last year, Russia used their production to push wheat prices down to a 3-year low. They had a bumper harvest and decided to flood the global markets with their supply. And when supply goes up, prices, where do they go? They come down. Who does this hurt the most? Farmers in the US and the EU, whose cost of production is unbelievably high. That's who suffers the most. In January last year, US soft red winter wheat sold for around $348 per metric ton, while Russian wheat sold for only $308 per ton. That's a $40 spread or 13% discount, which is massive for commodities. Just imagine how efficient pricing will get for BRICS once a grain exchange and trading system gets established. Prices will be optimized there and they will have advantage of price discovery, and the US, well, not so much. Prices being optimized for the global south also poses incredible challenges for US farmers. If countries in Asia and Africa can get cheaper wheat from Russia or BRICS, is there even a need to import produce from the US? In March this year, China reviewed the game plan. In just 1 week, Beijing cancelled over 500,000 tons of wheat imports from the US, and this is the biggest cancellation in history by far. China is the biggest food importer in the world, and when they dump imports of US wheat, it sends farmers scrambling. Now, all the forecasts can be thrown out of the window. Prices have to be readjusted because China, they are cancelling the orders for a reason. It's not just about geopolitics, it's about securing food supply at cheaper prices. They can buy wheat from Russia at more affordable rates while bypassing dollar sanctions. Is essentially a double win. In August, Beijing also pushed a new directive. They told importers to halt purchases of foreign grains like barley. Instead, they were told to buy from local suppliers to boost China's domestic farming industry. Doesn't this sound very familiar? Sounds just like the Chinese EV industry and semiconductors. Beijing, they're taking everything in-house. The US-China trade war is just accelerating the process like never before. This chart shows us China's wheat and corn imports. In 2020, demand for foreign corn and wheat flew up. Their livestock industry exploded and they needed a ton of food to feed the animals. Corn and wheat, they are inputs for their livestock. But even as meat demand stays high, China is now importing less and less from foreign suppliers. And those that they buy from the Chinese will be paying less. This tragedy is self-inflicted by the US and their never-ending sanctions. China's shifting towards domestic supply should frighten American farmers because now they have to find new customers. The setting up of trading systems and payment systems are game changers. It clobbers the West, especially the US, from multiple angles. Reliance on the dollar gets diminished. Countries in the BRICS can now optimize their trades as well, and that means paying less for their inputs and saving a ton of money. This is bad news for the West and the G7, and if the trading systems do manifest, the BRICS bloc will become even more competitive than ever before. But let me know what you think. Is Russia's payment system idea feasible? And will the BRICS trading system displace US farmers? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.